host live from the CX Therapy Studio, CX Therapy Season 5.
Good morning, Max. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Julien. How are you? How's Paris? How is the evening in the City of Lights?
Well, that's probably, beside Christmas, my favorite time of the month. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
There you go. It is that moment that we just spend our days pining for.
And one of the great things about the new format that we've got is I have this opportunity to talk about people's pain without being my pain, even though I feel for them, because most of the things we hear, we kind of feel, yeah, that could have been me. But yeah, it just feels good talking a little bit CX. So what's new in your world? Have you been thinking a little bit about Ian's story? What have you been doing lately?
Yeah. Well, what I've been doing is checking the mailbox. You want to see if we found anything there?
Let's check this out.
Now it's time to open this week's mailbag.
There we
Got
go.
the mailbag.
All right.
Let's see if there's a... Huh, guess what? There's a letter. All right. Let's see what we got today. Here we go. Ian Jacobs was our last guest, and he talked about his wife ordering sauce on the Amazon marketplace and the bizarre, I think it was a trifecta. There was Amazon, there was the company that manufactured it, and then there was the company that actually had the Amazon store where he bought the stuff. They broke one bottle, and if I remember right, the only remedy was to send them a whole new case. So they got a whole new case or a discount or something. It ended up working well, but there was this just crazy, more than a moment of, who's okay? Is this Amazon's problem? Is this the guy who runs the market vendor shop spot problem? Is this the seller of the sauce problem? And so it was just kind of this, it's akin to what you keep running into with your delivery issues. Who owns this? Who's responsible?
Exactly.
And the question that came in is Amazon falling short with the rules they have on the marketplace? Should it be clearer? Should there be some forcing they're doing to say, if you're selling here, we're going to make it very visible that this is you selling this? They're pretty good with the visibility, but not great. And is there, should people, if I'm allowed to sell there, should I have some sort of support mechanism in place? There didn't seem to be any forcing of anything like that.
Well, that's a good one. I'm actually not sure there should be something. And, normally we try not to talk politics here. But being French, I know a little bit about bureaucracy. And we are specialized in anytime something specific happens, we create a new law for it. But when you take this approach, same thing in business. When every time you have a tiny problem, you create a new process, you end up having so many processes that nothing actually works, or everything is too slow, or everything is too complex. So, what happened to Ian the other day sucked. But was it a common problem, or was it really, he ordered an item that was probably not meant for B2C? From a vendor that probably had no clue what he was doing, and ended up contacting the manufacturer, which he was probably not supposed to do this, even though that was the right thing to do in the context. So, his situation was so specific that if you were trying to create new rules just to cater for this kind of problems, you may, experiences with Amazon, generally speaking, generally speaking, are pretty good. If you ask Justin in Australia that we talked to last
Yeah, I
year,
was thinking about him when you said that.
he
Maybe.
may strongly disagree with it. And I've had a few hiccups, but compared to the number of items I've ordered on Amazon over the past decade, generally speaking, is pretty good. And when it's not good, they fix it pretty quickly and pretty well. So I don't know. I've mixed
well,
feelings.
that's a good point. And I kind of felt somewhat the same on Justin's situation, that there were some things about there that were not common. So yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And in this case, it had a happy ending. The vendor who made the sauce stepped up and gave Ian restitution and everything they needed. So it everyone muddled through.
That might be the thing here. That might be the thing here. It might be you can't ever have a process that's going to cover 100% of everything that could be happening, especially on a marketplace like Amazon, where you get billions of orders a year. You won't be able to cover every possible scenario. However, if you as a vendor on the marketplace, if you are somehow customer centric, you always find a way to fix it. You don't need a process to tell you how to fix it. And you just need to care. It's back to the story we had a couple of months ago with Ricardo, where I think it was a CEO or the CEO or some VP within the company that took the responsibility to pick up the phone and have a chat with the customer. That's exactly the same thing that happened to Ian there, which was maybe the owner of the manufacturer or whatever, who actually said, okay, I'm going to fix it. It's not my responsibility. It's not my problem. I did not even ship that thing. I have no idea where it is. It's not even in my system. But you know what? I care for my customers. He liked my sauce. I'm going to do something about it. And if you're customer-centric enough, you don't need a process. You don't need Amazon to tell you what to do.
It's just going to happen. It's just, yeah. Boy, I wish we could trust that.
Yeah, but that's how you decide which brand you want to work with in the future.
Fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough. Yeah. And that, given how much Ian's wife loves that sauce, that company may have made a very smart decision in the long run.
Exactly.
Being a very loyal customer for a very long time.
Exactly. What about, you know how much I love talking with you, Max, but I also love when we have a third party in the conversation. What about I invite today's guest to the studio?
Oh, please do. Please.
And now, please welcome this week's guest, a true CX expert.
Well, I get the privilege of introducing Michael. I've known Mike since, somewhere in the 90s, back in the Edify days. We worked together at a IVR company back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and Detroit was a young city just founded by their French founders.
There you go.
Mike has worked in the CCaaS contact center world for, since then, at least in and out. You've done some other things, mostly sales management, company management, etc. As you can see by the banner behind him and the picture of Tiger Stadium, a proud Denzian. Yeah. Why don't we start with that? What makes you so excited about Detroit? You have opined multiple times. Tell me a little about it.
Yeah, well, born and raised here, so it's a big thing. It's hometown. I think everybody feels a certain kinship to their hometown. Our hometown's been through a lot, a lot of trying times, a lot of great times, back when we were the auto capital of the world and things were phenomenal. The city used to be really big. It got really small. My dad moved from Toronto to Detroit. So I grew up visiting my grandma and grandpa at downtown Detroit. So I've got a strong kinship to it, and it's been through some hard times. But it's also made a great resurgence. There's also a lot of great things going on. So I get excited. Apple just had a couple of big announcements. They're opening a store in downtown Detroit. They're opening an AI manufacturing academy in Detroit. So there's a lot of good momentum. A lot of things are happening. It's a tough, gritty town, but there's a lot of beauty in it as well. So I've always had a special kinship to my hometown of Detroit.
Great. Tell me a little about Merlion and what you're doing now.
So when I was at Genesis, I was at Genesis for quite a while, and one of my roles at Genesis was I moved to Asia, moved to Singapore, and ran Asia Pacific for Genesis, and then ran Asia Pacific for Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise Division, which was really interesting. It was a great challenge. You know, I came into Genesis because I was one of those dinosaur IVR guys, and it bought an IVR company, so you know, we helped with that here in North America and then made the move over. But that was a huge impact on my career. It was really interesting, you know, getting into a very multicultural situation. You know, I had teams across China, across India, across Japan, across Australia, and everywhere else in between. So that had a big impact on me. When I moved back, I spent a little bit more time with Genesis, but it was time to move on. And I founded a little consulting company called Merlion. And Merlion is one of the national symbols of Singapore. I felt like I learned a lot, so that's my nod back to Singapore. And then I went on and worked at Salesforce, worked at Palantir, worked at a few other companies. And now that I am, and I'll get into my later years, now I'm in my later years, I'm back to my consulting firm right now and have kind of restarted Merlion, and we're doing a lot of interesting things. It's an interesting project to work on.
Cool. I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question with the question taking less than an hour.
I'm going to take however long it takes. I'm going to double it in the answer. So just
there you go. Dang it!
Right now.
So the stereotypical buyer of contact center software is in operations, is very conservative, is very under massive cost pressures. They run a very large cost center, and that is very visible. That creates an evergreen problem of, I have all these bodies that I'm paying a whole lot of money for. When we were doing IVRs in the 90s, it was all about, you can automate things, and automated calls are significantly less. And now with generative AI and LLMs and agentic AI, there's this mass of crazy bleeding edge technology being sold into very conservative, very thoughtful, caring for their customer buyers. You've kind of been involved in that process a lot more than most. That dynamic has always fascinated me. I don't know if you have any thoughts about what it takes to get someone like that to do these crazy software things we want them to do.
You know, it's funny. I've got a couple stories about that. One story is, you know, the last company I was at, I got involved with an energy company, and it was very traditional. The contact center was very traditional. The contact center was on-prem, not in the cloud. Their CRM was in the cloud, and the new chief executive officer of this company said, we are going to be AI first. And he probably went to a cocktail party and people started talking about Gen AI, and he went back to the company and said, all right,
we're doing this
first. So, and I don't know what that means as the CEO, but you're going to go do it. So I got to the contact center, and we, I'll call it Frankenstein together, a solution of trying to tie AI into a traditional contact center. The idea was we were going to transcribe the call and then run the call through Gen AI and do a wrap-up. The Gen AI generated wrap-up, we attached the call. And technically we could make it work, but it was expensive because we were they did not want to move to the cloud. I mean, the contact center said, we'll use AI, but we don't want to move to the cloud. It's just kind of like,
ouch.
Or we're not ready to move to the cloud, or we're going to move to the cloud next year. So we came up with a very expensive solution because it was going to be expensive trying to tie together this whole telephony system with real-time transcription and then send that off to you can imagine all the little lines going back and forth. It was pretty ugly. It was expensive, and they said, yep, let's go ahead and do that. Thankfully, and they signed a contract. So we started the work, and thankfully cooler heads pervaded, and they decided to move towards the cloud, which makes that whole process a lot easier. So, and that story kind of goes back to it was, remember when social media came out? and the CEO would come back and say, "What's our social media strategy?" Of course, it would be done on silent.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the poor contact center would be on the outside looking in, like, I didn't realize, 10,000 people complained today on Facebook. I had no idea. That never made it to me. So I think the same type of things going on with Gen AI right now. I think it has a lot of promise. There's interesting things it can do. And I think that puts more pressure on that person, especially a conservative contact center oriented person in a large organization that, and I think it's still one of the challenges is every once in a while you can find a executive running a contact center or above running and having a contact center beneath them that looks at the contact center as being strategic versus a cost center. And when they start looking at it being strategic as something that could benefit the company versus just answering questions, that I think they're fertile for doing some more work. But there's still a lot of that, Max. There's still a lot of that tension between. There's so many great technologies out there, but I have put together this contact center that's a culmination of 6 different solutions, and it's just not easy to of that tech debt onto the next generation.
And it's ironic, the cost you described just to do that transcription, and granted it's a multi-year project and there's a lot of other pain, but probably incremental cost to just say, you know what, we're going all the way to the cloud.
Well, we were telling these people that, if you were on, name your platform, name your next gen platform, and there's probably, a dozen of them. If you're on any of those platforms, this would just pretty much come out of the box. Like,
right. It's a feature. It's a feature. Yeah.
Something you click on, you don't spend $350,000 to get us to make it work for you. It's just something that, then you have to do the back end and the art of asking the right question with Gen AI to get the right response in and all those things. But I think all of that's coming along quite nicely. So,
yeah, it is moving. It's funny. I talked to a guy a little while ago. They were doing a big migration, all their over to CCaaS, and he said, "Well, we're not going to touch the IVR for 2 years. It's just, it's integrated to 5 different back-end systems. Nobody knows how the workflows work. It just, people dig themselves these big old holes." But the good news is I do think they're all trainable. So I think we can get to a point where people do move and the stuff is going to happen.
I agree.
I love listening to you guys talking. When I know that you've both been working in the early days of the IVR, feels like watching the movie Oppenheimer all over again. With 2 crazy scientists who probably had the people's best interest in mind, but you've created technologies that has been bothering people for decades.
Yeah, it used to be, you used to go to a cocktail party, like, what do you do? And my wife said, just don't tell them. Just tell them you're we don't.
I've been joking for years. I one time made the mistake of telling the woman cutting my hair what I did. And I came this close to getting a reverse mohawk. So
sharp objects in her hand. Yes. I remember I lived in Chicago and I worked for Edify, and you would go down to a really nice small bank in central Illinois, and you get to meet, you'd go meet the president of the bank, because this was like mind numbing. Like, what are you going to do? There's no way. You go in, you do the presentation, and we worked with these 4 other banks, and I could remember them saying, "There's no way you're ever going to come in here, and there's no way any of my customers are ever going to talk to a machine, and thank you very much. You seem like a nice young man." That shows you how long ago it was. And it would be 4 months later, the phone would ring. It wouldn't be him, but it would be somebody on the team saying, "Hey, could you come back down here and have a talk with us?" Because it just, the cost savings and all of that just went boom. But, it didn't, it came with CX, customer experience. It came with a lot of baggage, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
Well, whatever you guys have done in the...
For a lot of that. Max was responsible for baggage. He was responsible.
Yeah, I am. It's on me. That's why my head was buzzed.
Thank you.
I mean, whatever you guys have done in the past, I feel, Michael, like you've already paid for that, because now we're going to be listening to your story. It's about story.
Gather around, folks. It's time for guest CX story.
All right. What about you tell us a little bit about your customer experience story. What has happened to you?
Well, I just turned 65 last November, and not in Paris, but in North America, when you cross that threshold, there's a lot of different things that can happen. But one of them is going to the government to get your health insurance through Medicare. So last year I spent that year transitioning, and when I started thinking about what is it? It's complicated. What does that mean? When you turn 60, 61, you start thinking about it. When you turn 64, it becomes relatively apparent because 1,000 companies now know that you're 64, and 1,000 companies now know that you have to go to Medicare, and you get besieged with phone calls, with emails, with you name it. They're coming after you to, congratulate you on your birthday and would you buy this from me? So I started going through that journey last year, and it was a big journey. It was interesting. Everything I've ever heard about it was it's complicated, it's hard, and it's scary because you're going to make decisions now that, hopefully you live a few years after 65 that can affect you through your entire retirement. So that was the process I started last year, went through last year, and ultimately, had to log into Medicare and had to sign up for Medicare, had to sign up for insurance. It was complicated, long, and not easy. But that was kind of the journey that I had gone through. And if you want, I can go in a little bit more detail on that. But that overall is the journey that it was a big moment in my life to do it, and it was complicated.
Well, talk through some of the complications. What were you up against?
Well, there are a lot of different pieces of it. I'm really lucky. I live in a community where we have. That used to be called formerly Services for Older Citizens, but they had to change the name because nobody wanted to walk through the front door because they didn't want to feel like they were an older citizen. So now it's called the Bowl Life Center, the Bowl Life Center. But basically, it's this mansion not too far away, and they've converted it into this senior area. And one of the areas that they have a big program around is Medicare, and the interesting thing is when you start going through this process, there are all sorts of Medicare consultants, but a lot of Medicare consultants are tied into Advantage programs, Medicare Advantage programs, which is going to be one of your options. It's a paid option as you come out. So this is a nonprofit. Nobody gets paid. And the person they actually assigned to me was a woman that was a CFO of a major hospital chain in Southeast Michigan. So she was pretty bright and she was incredibly helpful. Yeah. But I went to.
Sorry, I gotta stop on that. Why did that woman? She just volunteered on the side of being a CFO and did this occasionally, or
retired from being a CFO.
Oh, retired.
In her retirement, this was what she was going to do, and she was phenomenal. She was really good. She was kind of referred to me by someone like, if you're going to go through this is who you should talk to. But there are a dozen people there, so they had a meeting. It was funny. They had a meeting, like probably in August. Of come on in and we're going to give you an overview. So we go to this meeting and I walk in and there's probably about 30 people there, and I realize all these people in this meeting are old. Then I realized, oh my God, I'm old too because I'm the same age as the people in this meeting. And the guy gets up in front of us and says, like, there's 30 of you here about, and it's complicated, it's confusing, and there's not one answer for all of you. There's 30 different answers about how to go about this. So we're going to help you through that process. And they were really good at helping us through the process. So I had the luxury of having this independent consultant, but I also, they send you this big book, about everything you need to know. Just read this book and you too could be an expert on what you should do next. And make sure you read it, because if you make a bad decision, you're kind of messed up for the rest of your life. So that's great. The internet, and even my buddy Claude, my AI buddy Claude, when I would kind of get into a situation where, like, what did they say, or how does this work, or what should I do, or what's the policy on this? I would go to Claude, and it was interesting. I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but a lot of the time it gave me really good information back, because you could just ask it a quick question and it would do it. But you have to make a decision on enrollment timing, like when are you going to enroll? And there's certain rules around that. And if you enroll too late, you mess up and you can't enroll too early. What Medicare, parts A, B, D, there's Advantage programs. There's this thing called Medigap, which is another insurance program. The costs are all different. The premiums are all different based on what you do. And once you get locked in, that's for the rest of your life. Prescriptions are huge. So they'll actually take your prescriptions and they'll punch them in. Like you can go to a site yourself, put all your prescriptions in. It'll tell you which insurance company you should go with and how much it's going to cost. It gives you the range. And it's funny, we were at the meeting and they're talking. My wife Annie was with me. And they said, oh, prescriptions, it's really important. They had a whole thing about prescriptions because it can be really expensive. And they kept saying, anybody on Eliquis, like that's really expensive. And they said that about 10 times. And every time they said it, my wife would look at me like, why are you on Eliquis? Like
you don't really need that, do you?
All right, exactly. Yes, you don't need that. Just take 13 aspirin every day. You'll be fine. So anyway, you had to work with that. And there's all different income-related adjustments, your future healthcare needs, should you be on. So it is, when you think about that pre-sales, if this was a product you were buying, the pre-sales, the amount of education that you should do or you could do or it's available to you, there's a lot, but it is confusing and not easily laid out. So because it's so individualized, there's too many options. I got through all of that, and it wasn't easy, but I worked with Ann. My wife was in healthcare. She's an occupational therapist at a big hospital, so she had seen what happens when people make decisions around that aren't necessarily great. So she was really good to support of all this. Got through it all, and then went through the process of actually applying for this, going to the government's website, going to the Medicare website, applying for everything, going to my healthcare website, applying for insurance, trying to cut up my old insurance. It's been a bit of a mess. Some things worked really well, some things haven't worked well. But and once you go through this, you're through it. Like I'm on the other side now. I'm still dealing with some issues that we're having to clean up. But anyways, that was what I went through, which is for me, it felt like a pretty big life change, pretty big life event as far as getting myself to be on the government dole for my health care.
Julien is just looking at us like, what the heck are you guys doing?
We have, both of my parents went through similar process a few years back. But that had nothing to do with healthcare. It's just purely the retirement system in France. When you get retired, that was probably the most stressful moment for my mom, having to upload her ID card 15 times and all of her salary slips for the past 45 years, not missing a single one. Otherwise, you don't get, you don't get the full pension and everything. So that I get. French people are not any better. It's just like it's not about health, but it's about the pension. But
your health is already, you're already on health. In France, everybody's covered under. I was in Singapore. Everybody was covered under health when I lived in Singapore. I think
exactly.
Yep.
And you probably need additional health insurances if you really want to be covered for really everything. But that's I wouldn't say simple, but that's as simple as buying an insurance for your house or for your car. It's not more complex than this.
Yeah,
so
very much like a concierge service. I remember it was like you could pick like what level of hospital care you want, what level of things. Like you could
exactly.
You could go through a menu of picking little better things. I lived through that in Singapore, and I thought it was actually pretty good. But anyway, this was complicated.
But your system here, so obviously, quite a few questions here. The first one is, you mentioned you had to sign up once you had a chance to digest the tons of information that you had to go through. You signed up online.
Yep.
Is it the standard process, or that was your choice? Could you have done it in the office that was welcoming you with a meeting? Could you have done it on a standard paper form? Could you have done it over the phone? Or was it a computer thing, an internet thing?
Kind of yes to all of the above. You could fill out forms and ship them in. You could go to an office, fill out forms and go to an office and hand them in. And I had to do that at one point because things were getting messed up. So I did go to an office. You can call in, but I don't think you can go through the whole process by calling in. I think you have to physically send them something, or you go to their online portal, the Medicare, government online portal. So you have different options of signing up.
And how long does that take? The entire process of finding the information, I'm guessing we're talking about a month, but the actual online process, how long does that take?
I would tell you that I was kind of surprised because I so much pain and consternation of figuring out what the hell I wanted to do that once I went online, I figured this is going to be just as hard. It was laid out pretty easily. When you would make a choice, all the things that no longer apply would go away, and it's kind of this building of choices, right? So I thought the web experience was really, really good. It made it easy. And it also, because it's a long process, you could stop and then log back in 2 days and you'd be right where you were. If you didn't finish the process, it would save the process, which sounds like a small thing, but I've done things in the past that have been complicated. You get to a certain point, you need one more piece of information. You go and leave, and now you're going to start from scratch. So all in all, I would say it was a really positive process, and it probably took a half hour to 45 minutes to go through that process of making all my selections and doing the things I wanted to do.
So here is a surprising thing for me. It's 45 minutes doesn't seem like too much for a choice that's going to influence the rest of your life. So it's fair. It's not 6 hours, 45 minutes. It's acceptable. It's big enough that you can invest this kind of time. But why does it take so long to get to the decision? What I'm trying to say here is, if they have such a website that, you enter something, the other options disappear, that is so interactive, why isn't there a better way to get that information? How come they give you a book? I mean, you've shown the book. This is thick. I've read novels that were shorter than that.
Yeah, another way to ask it is,
it changes every year. It changes every year. This is the 2025 version. 2026 will be different. Julien, I think the answer to that is that, these programs grow and build over time, and different policies and different politics. Right now, it's in the middle of the political world as well. Things change and offers change, and these things continue to evolve. And in the U.S. right now, there's this huge conflict between insurance companies, healthcare providers, and patients. There's a lot of friction of what gets approved or what doesn't get approved. And so I think over time, the reason this is so complicated is I think they continue to try to make, I don't want to call them exceptions, but being able to cover these things in different ways. It's gotten to be really expensive. Healthcare is incredibly expensive. This program is expensive. And it comes down to a lot of it individual. Like if you're Max and you're healthy, and Max will turn 65 in 20 years now, which would be great. I'm excited.
Yeah. Or a month ago, your choice.
And you live in Northern California and your family's there and you travel a little bit, after you retire, but you don't travel a lot. You don't have like a summer home in, Portland or something like that. And you've got a huge healthcare facility that you've been going to. There's a big one out in California, Kaiser Permanente. There are these advantage programs that are less expensive than traditional. And if you're going to do everything at Kaiser and you're not going to be going all over the place, then that could be a good option for you. And it's going to be less expensive. I am different than that. I've had a lot of medical things going on, so that hasn't been great. I've got a little place in Florida, a little place in Northern Michigan, a little place in Detroit, and I don't want that advantage program to dictate where I can't go or charge me a lot more if I go out of network. So it starts becoming really personal. These decisions become really dependent on where you are, who you are, what you see your life when you retire as. Are you going to travel? Are you going to stay in one place? Are you relatively healthy? All these things become factors. And that's why there's so many different options. And that's what makes it, to me, it felt like it was really complicated because you didn't want to make a bad choice.
I agree. I understand that. But the three of us have worked at least at some point in the SaaS industry.
Yep.
And being able to compare very complex products, especially in the CX world, where you have 500 million features and they all have the same name and you have to compare product A to product B. We got pretty good at explaining what offer A contains versus offer B versus offer C. And then we've got sales engineers that are fantastic at taking your needs and telling you what you need to integrate and how you're going to integrate it. we've mastered that. Plus, for the past 2-3 years, you talked a little bit about your experience with cloud. We have Gen AI now that apparently when you use it at your personal level, asking question is pretty efficient. So if it was actually supported by the system, it could just be even more efficient. So Gen AI could probably help by asking 10 general question and then 10 more personal question following up, could probably help people fix all their problems within 20 minutes or 30 minutes versus 6 months. Isn't there a gap here between what's being used today? Yes, it's incredibly complex. And what you were saying about processes added over process, pretty much the opening statement we had with Max earlier, talking about our friend Ian, where when you add process over processes over processes over processes, you make everything more complex. That's probably exactly what's happening here. But isn't technology a way to fix that nowadays in 2025?
I definitely think it could be. And I'm doing work, I worked at a company called Palantir for a while. Now I'm working for a system integrator that does work on Palantir. And we're doing a couple interesting projects right now. But to take it, and I've thought about this. So one of the determining factors is, for me, is my history, my health history. But that's all in a system called Epic. So if you could somehow tie Epic into a workflow chain that tied into Medicare, that also tied into like where I have real estate, that also, you could spire together a bunch of relevant information about me relatively quickly that you could feed to like a Medicare engine, and probably have saved me a lot of time and effort of trying to figure those things out. So you go in, Epic already knows all my prescriptions. Epic already knows all my conditions. Epic knows, where I've been a patient before. So, I think to your answer to your question is yes. I think there are definitely things you could do to kind of automate that data flow to make it a lot easier for people to go out and figure it out. Then you start getting into privacy issues and information and HIPAA and all those fun things. But, the data is out there, the information's out there that probably could help you streamline the process quite a bit.
One piece of this, you mentioned you found a nonprofit, and there are these advantage programs, and if one of the things that happens is the people who are there to help have a vested interest in a specific approach. So you're in your case, Kaiser would not make a lot of sense for you, but one of the happy birthday letters you got could well have been from Kaiser saying, hey, look at this great deal, even though it is completely the wrong thing for you. And I don't know, how much of that did you see, and do you have any thoughts on how we deal with that?
I feel really fortunate because we've got this center like close to where I live, and I was aware of it and I was able to go. And I actually told some friends, and they went. I have another friend of mine who is the same age. It's funny how my friends are all about the same age. Who lives in an area, and one of his neighbors is a broker, insurance broker, and has relationships with 4 or 5 different advantage programs, and is a retirement Medicare consultant. And it's all of a sudden you're talking to a consultant that can help you through it, but they have a vested interest in something. Their vested interest in selling you one of these 5 advantage programs. And an advantage program could be perfect for my buddy, could be 100% perfect for my buddy, but he's not going to go with traditional A and B because of that. And I think there's a lot of that. That's why the outreach is so strong. I think there's a lot of that in the industry. People know someone or a friend of a friend, and it's that friend of a friend has a vested interest in what they're in there talking to you about. And because it is confusing and difficult, I think it makes it easy for people to show up as the expert. That's why I felt very fortunate to have a kind of be able to talk to some consultants who didn't have a vested interest in what I did. Were just there to help me through the process.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of that, Max. There's a lot of that. And again, I don't want to bash advantage programs. They could be perfect for someone, someone different than me, but for what they're doing and for where they are in their life and for where they're going to be in their retirement, I'm going to live at that crazy place in Florida and I'm never going to leave. And there's a great clinic right there. And I'm going to get all my health care through that clinic. Perfect.
But from your story, I understand that, correct me if I'm wrong, if you didn't have that free center next door,
Yeah.
if you had to figure out everything on your own, that would not have been the same journey, and the outcome may have been very different as well. So,
No, it literally, you're absolutely right. I was very, very fortunate.
is it common? Is it you find this kind of centers absolutely everywhere, or are you just lucky?
Just lucky. And it's funny, I've learned a little bit more about them. They've served like Metro Detroit and beyond. They have people calling in just to talk to them. I mean, people find them through word of mouth and for what they do, and it's just a great service to the community. It's kind of funny, you use them, and then you never talk to them again because you're off doing whatever you're doing. And they ramp up in the fall, because the fall is open enrollment for Medicare. So ramp up in the fall, so they're ready to do that. But Julien, to your point, I don't know of any other centers because this is the one nearest me. But I know I've had friends now drive in from across the city, drive an hour and a half to get there to talk to people. So it's a nice service. But I don't know. I'm sure there's others around the country, but I don't think it's prevalent.
Yeah, I hope I'm not wrong, but my understanding for my circumstance, I'm working for a company that provides me with healthcare insurance, and therefore I don't yet need to sign up for Medicare. If I'm wrong about that, my understanding is once you get out of the 6-month window, 3 months before your 65th birthday, 3 months after your 65th birthday, your benefits will be reduced for life. And the other is we have these things called healthcare savings accounts, where I put money aside for things that insurance doesn't cover, copays and certain, even off over-the-counter drugs and things like that. And that's tax deductible. My understanding is the minute I sign up for Medicare, that's no longer tax deductible. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait. I want that. But I'm pretty sure I'm right, and that I'm not going to get penalized for life, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, you should dig into that a little bit deeper. The one thing is you can enroll in Medicare and not take Medicare. Like, that's one of the problems I just had. They thought I was still covered under.
That's what I've been told. Doing that will kill the HSA deduction.
So you should double tap into that, because one of the things is the downside, and I'm not saying this as a Medicare expert, so please, this is why I want to.
You're a volunteer.
Yes, I'm not a volunteer. But things like pre-existing conditions, if you miss the window, then you're going to be evaluated when you sign up for it, and your premium should be higher depending on what your health is. You've got a window signing up where they don't look at any pre-existing conditions. That you just sign up. You could have some terrible disease, and you would sign up and you would be covered just like someone that didn't have a terrible disease. But if you miss that window, then you're opening yourself up to that. I think that's the case. I think that's what you should lean into. Now, you may not have any pre-existing conditions, but if I were you, I would go to Claude and ask them these questions and see what Claude has to say.
And you got to read the book.
I don't have one now, doesn't mean I couldn't acquire one between now and when I do sign up. Oh, there, I'll just skim that.
Well, we are slowly reaching the end of today's episode. And we just opened the first online center for Medicare information for people who are about to turn 35 or within 6 months after their 65th birthday.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your candor today. Thank you for sharing your experience and helping us analyze it a little bit deeper. Max, I'm sure you have a lot of reading to do now.
I do. But we're forgetting to ask Mike the key question. Do you feel better after your time on the couch?
I do feel better. I feel very relaxed. This is very nice. You guys are very accommodating, and I like the international flair from Paris and from San Francisco. So this is very nice. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being our guest. As usual, thank you everyone for watching today's episode. If you have questions, if your questions are related to your personal situation about Medicare, you can find Merlion Consulting.
Got a whole new line of business opening up.
But I also have to check whether, like, I'm on the couch, I'm getting therapy. Is this covered under Medicare? Is your therapy that you're providing here on the couch covered under Medicare?
For the moment, this is free therapy, so you don't need.
Yeah.
That we need to start talking about this, Max. And that's a new business model. You don't actually charge the audience. You charge.
I just realized we may have a whole thread of income here that we did add.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Perfect.
Please feel free to send your questions, your comments, your suggestions through LinkedIn, through email, through Twitter, now X, through YouTube, through whatever means you prefer. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a lovely day, and we will see you next month with a new guest. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Michael. See you guys soon.